You were a hero on a mysterious adventure to defeat the embodiment of all things evil, a force that has brought terror and plague down upon your people. You must fight hideous fiends that stalk the land on the way to the evil one's castle, with only the solace of the church to mend your splintered spirit along the way. Only after his defeat can you release people from the grips of fear and return peace to everyone. This could very well have described the plot of many games from the 8-bit generation like Faxanadu or Phantasy Star, but here we're going to have a look at the second game in the Castlevania series. Castlevania II Simon's Quest is something that I've been putting off playing for a long time now. I didn't have any of the games from this series growing up, and my only experience with it was a very short foray into the first NES game a few months ago where the Reaper stopped me dead in my tracks. With all the trouble I ran into with the first game, I was convinced that the second would be even more difficult and convoluted than the first, given its change in gameplay style and the reportedly bad translation. Thankfully, like most other games I've been playing lately, with a bit of perseverance and practice, I was able to push my way through and come out triumphant on the other side. Simon's Quest is an adventure game with RPG elements that has a distinctly macabre feel to it. It took the lively and bright backdrops of games like Battle of Olympus and Zelda 2: The Adventure of Link and replaced them with the dreary, dying atmosphere of a cursed world. There's a sense of urgency in this game that isn't really felt in many others in this genre, and it's not just due to the invisible clock ticking away behind the scenes that determines your ending. Your character's been wounded, and those wounds are festering with evil. The only way to heal them is to kill Dracula again after resurrecting him. What a story! The direness in each moment of the game is underscored by Simon's silent suffering as you make your way from place to place. The music also really helps to set the tone, and this soundtrack is by far my favorite from the entire series. One thing that I really loved about Simon's Quest is its linear world. There were only a few places where paths branched, but every branch had a clear dead end, making exploring feel less open-ended. I liked the sense of closure when I'd reach a physical impasse, rather than wondering if I'd left something undone, and this helped to make the experience feel like it was constantly moving forward, rather than stagnating. The entire game world was so small, in fact, that I didn't even have to map anything. The outdoor scenery was varied enough that I usually knew exactly where I was. Although towns looked very similar to one another, they were uniquely laid out, which helped me to differentiate between them well. The mansions were also different colors on the outside and had very distinct layouts within, dissolving any mystery of whether or not I'd been there before. Because of these things, I never felt lost, and that's not something I can say for many games of this nature. Linearity was also a welcome feature for the mansions. Although it was sometimes tricky to find a way forward due to the many hidden pitfalls and secret passages, the mansions felt like they were just the right length. Getting in and out was easy, and with very few boss encounters to face in these areas, I felt much more confident working my way through these than I did in other games where I'd desperately be trying to conserve health for a final boss fight. Of course, there were a few spots that I struggled with a lot, like places that required very specific jumps, or some others with fake blocks that I couldn't seem to remember no matter how many times I fell through them, but I never felt overwhelmed at any point. I also appreciated that the expectations in each mansion were the same and that there were no real surprises. You could always find a steak salesperson and an orb in each one. I love formulaic, predictable gameplay with the occasional twist, and the mansions nailed that. Something that really hampered my experience with Castlevania II was that I never knew the name of the town I was in. There was nothing in the manual, and even though there were what appeared to be signs when you'd first enter, I don't think they could be read. This gave rise to a number of problems because NPCs constantly referred to town names and names of people to look for, even though there was no way for me to follow up on any of this information in a meaningful way. In a new area, I never ran into the usual welcome to here person, nor did anyone ever state their own name in conversation, making many of these information trails go cold pretty fast. This on its own never had me feeling stuck since I'd just talk to everyone and hope for the best, but having some connection between hint information and actual people out in the world would have made progressing much less mystifying at times. Battling through Simon's Quest felt great. I never felt like I lacked the tools I needed to defeat enemies, and upgrades to equipment and weapons were all very well outlined in the manual with the exception of Dracula's body parts. The manual descriptions are completely out to lunch for those, and that was surprising to me given how informative and accurate the rest of the information there is. Who knew that equipping a rib bone can make a hero feel like a spineless coward as well as be a shield to protect them? It's definitely one of the stranger things about this game. I'm not going to pretend like getting through the constant onslaught of enemies was easy. The day and night cycle wasn't as annoying as I'd anticipated, but when I ran up against enemies that annihilated me, my RPG senses kicked in and sent me searching for upgrades or trying to find a less treacherous path. I did die pretty often, but thankfully continuing was really generous here too. Instead of being pushed back to a hub point or to the beginning of the mansion that you got roasted in, you got to go back to the very point that you died. The only downside is that you'd usually end up being pushed straight into the arms of whatever killed you in the first place when the game started up again, but I take that over having to do the walk of shame every time. Now, I know that the translation gets harped on a lot, but I honestly didn't find it that bad. I had a couple of things about the game spoiled for me, like kneeling and waiting for the tornado to come at the cliff, but apart from that, I was more or less completely blind on the rest of the game and was able to feel my way through a lot of it without too much help. The manual very clearly states that some townspeople are pranksters and will lie to you, and in the spirit of taking chances, it didn't take too long to figure out which statements led to dead ends. That's not to say that the translation is perfect by any means. There were several times where I was able to interpret the intention of a clue, but applying it proved to be difficult. For example, I got stuck on what to do with Dracula's heart. There were hints about a curse affecting different things throughout the land, and two particular hints about a cursed dead river and being able to destroy the curse with Dracula's heart connected in my head. I was thinking that the curse was more like the poison that affected those swampy parts where you need to use laurels to get through, but it actually had nothing to do with that, and I spent a lot of time stroking my chin about how to go about it. Thankfully, I had some help while I was streaming the game to realign my thinking around how to progress, but I'll be the first person to admit that it would have taken me much longer to figure it out without a friendly nudge here and there. Don't even get me started about the graveyard duck. There are some things that no amount of video game experience can prepare you for. For example, in this one area where you should be able to just see a little bit of a platform below the surface of some water, I couldn't actually see that on my CRT. If somebody hadn't pointed that out to me, it would have taken me an awfully long time to figure out what to do there. Other hints like garlic summoning the stranger in the graveyard were extremely clear, but honestly, many other things just sorted themselves out from simply exploring and talking to every person I could. The hints almost felt secondary. Seeking out townspeople is something I do in every game, both out of necessity and for immersion. I searched every house for secret passages and hidden books, and when I got stuck, I went back and searched them again for anything I might have missed. Even things like having my crystal stolen and replaced with a different one could have been entirely missed by not being thorough enough in my quest, and I'm glad that my RPG experience took over in most cases. I think a lot of the benefit that I had playing through this game comes from simply being an adult. I couldn't imagine trying to piece disjointed clues like these together as a kid without some kind of life experience. Castlevania II does just about everything right in my eyes, charming translation included, and it's only a shame I didn't get around to playing it sooner. If you enjoy games with good action, fantastic music, and a little bit of potentially unwarranted mystery, Simon's Quest is one worth embarking on.